Welcome back to Brave Talks. I'm Emily Nolan, and we are joining with Sara Agah Franti and Marti Nikko again, talking about the tools that we use in our postpartum journeys to have compassion for ourselves and navigate the murky waters of postpartum. In our last episode, you heard a lot about what our postpartum journeys were like. And in this episode, we're going to share what we do to stand in our power and have compassion for ourselves. I'm really looking forward to sharing this episode with you. It's truly life-changing, especially if you're going through the new motherhood period. Thanks for listening. I remember maybe a month postpartum, I was nursing Ollie in the rocking chair, like picture of, the postpartum mom, the perfect picture. And I remember thinking actually, while I was pregnant, I had a vision of me like nursing my son and my husband coming home from work and waving and just like, it was perfect, right? And I remember in this rocking chair 1 month postpartum, and I was just weeping and I was so lonely and I was so isolated. And it wasn't that vision that I had understood motherhood to be. I knew it was going to be challenging, but did I truly understand what that challenge was? Had anyone truly told me that I'm going to be sitting in the nursing chair, weeping from loneliness, literally crying on my son, who I love so much. And my husband was like, do you want me to stay? Do you want me to go? I had no answers. I didn't know. And so I'm wondering, in that loneliness, is there a piece of advice that you can give of service to women who are having that feeling, especially now during quarantine and this like intense isolation?
Fuck, it's hard. It's hard.
Yeah.
It's really hard when you're feeling that deep isolation and feeling really depressed to have the energy then to reach out. I would say it's actually the responsibility of the community to continuously check on new mothers, people, your family members. There needs to be a greater awareness around your immediate community, your family, your husband, your siblings, your mom, if your mom is around or near, and then your greater community, your network of friends, and maybe that should be something that's talked about before you have your child with your friends and community. But there needs to be an awareness around that. And that means that we need to start talking about it more. And again, it's that same thing of like, if I'm depressed, it doesn't mean I love my child. And that's not true. If I'm feeling this hardship way or loss or grief, that it means that I wasn't meant to be a mother and why am I doing this? And that's just not true. That those dualities can exist at the same time. And we just have to keep bringing that awareness to the community and to women so that when we're experiencing that, we also have community who are aware of those things and who can call on us. And as you know, when you're dealing with somebody who has an eating disorder, it does not help to say, don't have a eating disorder. It's the same kind of thing. So we have to help through embrace and through care and love. And there needs to be awareness around that with our immediate community and the larger community, your friendship community, because you had friends before, and you definitely had somebody who knocked you up. So,
I love so much that you said that, because that's like, as you were speaking, Emily, like that's what was coming through my head, because you will feel lonely. Like there's no way that you can flip the switch either. And so my words to someone who's feeling that is like, I get it. And to just reinforce like what you would say, Marti, like it doesn't mean that you're a bad mom. It doesn't mean that you're not fit to be a mother. It doesn't mean that you're going to feel like this forever, but I understand that you're feeling this now and it's very real. Like that's the worst part too. And I feel like those postpartum questionnaires are not enough. Like,
no.
Have you been crying for more than 2 weeks about something? And I remember like, I was like, well, kind of like everything makes me cry. I feel like I've ruined my life. But what's happened in the last 5 months is that when we quarantine here at our hotel, there was 2 women who are yoga teachers. One of them was actually here helping us as our nanny. And she's actually a yoga teacher in the Bay. And then her business partner also happened to be on the island. And so they were here and we had this communal living thing going, you know, and it was really awesome. And I think that, and they actually went back to the Bay on Tuesday, and I said, like, this, the one thing that I've learned is that I really appreciate this, because it's not the expectation that people are going to be like the caretaker of your child, but just that the energy is spread out, like that there's other people who are engaging with your child, or that you know that if you just need to go to the bathroom, they can hold them and you're okay, or if you go close your eyes for 10 minutes, or if you have to run an errand, or just knowing that there's a support system around you. And so before, I had this dream of like having a neighborhood like the cul-de-sac, but just even more like elaborate, you know, having this community where there's people around and you can throw your bike and your bike's not gonna get stolen, and like everyone shares the basketball hoop. Like I would love that. And then having things even a little bit closer, I really love that too. And I'm also someone who's very private, and my home is my sacred space. I don't like people coming over, I need to know who's coming in this space, how long they're going to be there, when am I going to have it back to myself, because we share so much of our lives out on the road in hotel rooms and tour buses. And so I was really nervous. I was like, what is this quarantine going to be like with Taj and having other people here? And it was really awesome. And so that's why we need these kind of podcasts, and not just like talking about it, but it's like everything. It's like talking about it, and then what are we going to do about it? So I think, like, for myself, I think it's like leading by example, you know, and showing how you can show up for your friends, and even just the check-ins. Like now when someone tells me they're pregnant, I can like look at them and be like, how are you feeling? But it's not just like, how are you feeling? It's like, no, really, how are you feeling? Like, tell me how much it sucks. Tell me about your pain. and I can empathize with you. And I think that in postpartum too. And so many cultures have that. And so like we've lost that in our society. Like in Bali, people live in their family compounds. They have 3-4 generations. You're living with your uncle's kids, you know, and the cousin's wife. And so there is this support, and it's not always perfect, and it's not always great, and there's always family drama. But I think if I do decide to have another kid, like I want to lean into the 40 days at home, have people come feed me, have people come check on me, you know. So communal living, I think that's where we should start shifting towards.
In a pandemic, nonetheless.
Well, it's your pod, right? That's like, you know.
You know, you guys are stuck here.
And if we're gonna have to keep isolating this, you might as well make your pod.
Absolutely. What I'm gathering and feeling right now is that, and I don't want to be so bold, but I'm going to go there. I just feel like our community has failed us as mothers. What Marti's saying about just showing up, education, accountability, check-ins, all those things. Sara, what you said about getting the questionnaire postpartum. I remember my postpartum questionnaire was like one day after I gave birth, when I was in the biggest high of my life. And even if I had gotten the questionnaire 1 or 2 months postpartum, would I have been honest? Would I have actually said, you know, I'm depressed or whatever? Because then I'm thinking like, well, and this was my journey, I'm breastfeeding on demand. Like, I don't have time for a therapist. I don't have time to leave the house. I don't have time for any of this like shit that I need. Like, everything's about my son. And I feel that our community is not set up to help us succeed. And we are clawing our ways out of postpartum. And then now, Sara, in our journey, and Marti, I would say at 3 years old, I'm sure you're going through the same thing too. And you're not 3, but your daughter, 3, obviously, with a 3-year-old, that there was something in our lives that got us from that postpartum feeling into this powerful person that we are now. And for me, I had a girlfriend who was like always checking in with me, and she has a boot camp course for women entrepreneurs, and it's a special boot camp. It's not some like one size fits all, but it's really about like amplifying your voice and doing your work of heart, right? Your career love. And she dragged me out of postpartum. And I tell her that all the time. I'm like, you have sole responsibility. I mean, I said yes, but you took me out of the fog and into the light, and like, I'm going to pay it forward because that changed my life. I remember being like so bored from the like mundane caregiving tasks. I mean, that's a huge role. So shout out to all the caregivers full time. I remember being so bored that when I put my son down, I would just fall asleep because I was just exhausted from that like cycle. So is there a moment in your life, like how my girlfriend, Amy Jo, really like dragged me out of that fog and just like asked me to fight with her, you know, and like, you can do this. She believed in me. Was there a moment like that for any of you guys?
Definitely there was a moment like that for me in this in this postpartum journey. I definitely feel I wasn't diagnosed clinically depressed, but I am sure that I was, and still now grapple with that. I can speak to that a little bit after we hear Sara too, if there's time. But I would have to say that what woke me up, unfortunately, was a dragging through the dirt. And I can be honest and say who was dragging me through the dirt. My husband was dragging me through the dirt, not intentionally. And I'm just being honest because I think women also need to hear truth. He was going through what I would call a mental breakdown himself. You know, he was on an airplane almost every single weekend, traveling all the time, working really hard. We had this increased responsibility of my pregnancy, which was, again, not easy, birth not easy, new baby not easy. Now he's watching his wife go into this clinically depressed state, doesn't know how to help me, maybe because of our own conditioning, thinks I should be able to get up and go, you know, do some yoga, do your things that you know how to do, you know. That drew us, that created a divide. He's a very present father. So when he's home, he is changing the diapers, he's the one that chefs it up in the kitchen. So it wasn't about his non-participatory actions with our family, but there was definitely a real personal space that was being created, and a spiritual disconnection from ourselves. And that happens for most couples when a new being is birthed into the dynamic. But this was happening in an extreme way because I feel like he was going through his own mental breakdown and burnout. And as he was doing this, he was making decisions that he thought was helping himself, which only created more turmoil, more internal disruption, and as a result created a lot of harm to our family, sadness, and increased confusion. And so that's, I can honestly say, what woke me up. Do I think it needed to be that way? You know, there's a lot of bypassing that happens with spirituality. Do I think that, oh, that must have had to happen for all of this to be now good? I'm not a big believer in that, actually. I believe that people can actually come to their senses and do good and be good, and not have to, you know, drag people through the dirt. And I'm using that phrase just because that was the feeling that I had. And it left me feeling so alone that I thought I was alone, meaning I'm gonna have to do this myself. And that's what triggered the switch of like, get up, and not only get up, what am I doing? How am I gonna support my kids on my own if this is gonna be the situation? Whatever the situation was, we could have couples discussion if you'd like in the future. But I don't want to say so much because he's not here to also represent like what he was going through. That would be an unfair conversation for me. But at the time, I can only express how I was feeling, which was, how am I going to pull it together? And actually, Sara, that's when Sara and I really started having some deeper conversations about relationship, about motherhood, womanhood, and all of these things. And really that's what kind of, and as I started to wake up to what was going on and started to focus on myself, because I needed to really focus on myself. And not that I'm just doing the things that I have to do, like you said, kind of the will, but now I'm gonna have to like infuse life into this flame that is flickering. I'm gonna have to start blowing on the embers to create a larger fire, so that I could now start to do the things like live and figure out what the work is going to be, and figure out how I'm going to infuse my art, be me, shine again, be who I am, which I know can carry for myself and for my kids. And ultimately, I was not trying to divide my family, but to bring my family closer. And that's exactly what happened. And that's what helped to heal that the immediate tragedy that was happening. That's what helped to heal and brought him back home too, mentally, with his awareness and like, oh shit, what I'm doing isn't what I want, and this isn't what I've spent, and a lot of it really at the root of it was burnout. It was the heavy weight of society that we're all carrying. It actually has to do with the issues that we're seeing right now with the revolution, with Black Lives Matter. This is Black Lives Matter, but it really has to do with the understanding that these structures, the structure of white supremacy, patriarchy is just as a nice word for white supremacy. Mm-hmm. That word was created by white supremacy. So when we say patriarchy, that's what we're really speaking on. And that weight of that conditioning that we're all bearing, the competition between women has to do with white supremacy. So when you start to dig a little bit deeper and have these understandings, like, whoa, it's like a wake up. Women need to lift women up, all women need to lift all women up right now. And to understand that competition, that divide between women really comes from this structure. And so does the structure of men who are burning out, men who are going 24/7, trying to keep this thing together. They don't realize that's what they're doing, but the pressure to keep it together. And then you experience something like what my husband experienced, which is this really deep burnout. Underneath it all, it was just burnout. He needed rest, he needed healing, he needed to feel loved and cared for, as I did, as everyone did. And that quarantine kind of slowed everything down. And now we are living in the home truly with each other. And it was an opportunity for us. I know that it hasn't been easy for a lot of people, but it has been an opportunity for us to really come back to why we do this. Why we do this, I mean, in relationship with each other. What's at the center of all of that? Before we destroy it all, what's at the center? Oh, whoa, this is the nectar. We want to protect that and hold that with gentle hands and come back to that. So that's what's been happening. So yeah, I got woken up, I was dragged through the dirt, and I didn't have a choice at that moment.
Bow down. I know.
Yeah.
Sara, do you have a story you want to share?
Yeah. So my background, my parents are refugees. They came to Canada in 1982. I was born in Canada. And so I saw my parents work really, really hard to make it. And so I'm first generation Canadian, and I go through the same thing. Like if you Google like brown girl problems, all the memes about immigrant parents, like I'm like textbook about it, And so you saw everything that your parents had to sacrifice and give up. And in my family scenario, it was actually being away from their own parents because they were facing religious persecution in Iran. And so I felt this sense of like, okay, if my parents gave up everything and came with nothing and built up to this, and they would always say, and they would say, we want you to be more successful because you get to stand on our shoulders and create even bigger greatness for yourself. So I always had this pressure to be able to like, just do it. If my parents did it, I can do it. And so asking for help wasn't something that came second nature for me. It was always like, I need to figure it out. And so I worked as a nurse for a long time, and I burnt out from that, and I started my own business, but I did everything myself. Like I was too afraid to admit to anyone that I didn't know how to do something. So I would just figure it out. I figured out how to do social media, figured out how to build a website, figured out how to do email campaigns, figured out how to do budgets. Like I just made it happen, and everybody would glorify that. And they're like, oh, Sara, you're so great. You're so talented. You're such a hard worker. And so then when I had Taj, I realized that I only had a certain capacity. My cup is only so full every day. And what am I going to give that cup to? And a lot of times, like the things that would trigger me before, I would no longer even I wouldn't allow them to trigger me, because I didn't want to have to give anything from that cup to that issue or to that person or to that dark feeling, because I was like, I literally have to give it to my son. Like I would feel so guilty if I was crying while breastfeeding, because I was like, oh my God, the energy that is in this breast milk now is being transferred into him. And I don't want him to feel like awful, and like the things that go through your mind. So Taj was like 5 months old, and I was trying to juggle it all, do it all myself, show up like the great person that everybody would always like praise me to be. And I remember I was driving home from running errands. I think I had like 2 back-to-back conference calls, because it was like the best place to do it in the car, where the baby's like sleeping in the car seat. And I got to the red light, and I was just so tired that I just started to bawl. And I was like, why am I putting so much pressure on myself? Why am I trying to run 5 different projects and raise a kid and show up? Like I can't show up as a wife. Like I wasn't showing up in my relationship because I didn't have the energy to. And I thought that if I was a successful businesswoman, then my husband would still adore me, because I'm like, well, look at everything I can do, And so my like Athena, like Marianne Williamson says that we have goddesses, and every goddess is a darkness and a light. And so my doer was on like overdrive. And so I like stopped. Like I completely stopped. I literally did things like I turned off all the notifications on my phone. I told the people that I worked with that I was only checking emails like Tuesdays and Thursdays, and that was it. I took email inboxes off of my phone so that I could only check them if I was sitting on my computer. So these are very like logistical things that I did, practical things that I did. I started seeing a therapist. I started seeing a marriage therapist, which is awesome. Doesn't mean that you're having any problems. It's just like, how do we make things better? And then I started working with a coach. Like I literally was like, I need someone to hold me accountable and to help guide me through this, because I don't know where else to go. And it's such a humbling thing as entrepreneurs, to be able to know what our own limits are as individuals and when we have to lean in. And I think this whole thing of leaning in is in every aspect. So it's in motherhood, it's just women supporting women. It's knowing what your capacity is and how someone can elevate you by sharing their knowledge with you. So I started working with a coach, which was amazing. And I started saying no to some projects. It felt really good to actually say no to my husband sometimes, because we do a lot of work together. And if he would say, hey, Sara, can you do this graphic for me? And I would say, yeah, but I can do it next week. I can't do it right now. Where the old me would be like, yeah, no problem. And I would stay up really late and figure it out. And so it's empowering to know that you can control your narrative, but you have to find that courage inside yourself to be able to make those hard decisions, which might be disappointing someone in the moment, but that disappointment will quickly dissipate because they care about you and they love you. So working with this coach has been awesome. And it's just knowing that I don't have to do everything alone. And I think, when I think Marti reached out to ask me something about just motherhood, like I don't even know what it was, but this is the beauty of social media. I know a lot of people hate on social media. There's a dark side of social media, but there's a dark side to everything that we do in our life. And there's a really beautiful side in this connection that Marti and I have been in the same community and space for years, and we've never met in person. But the way that we've been able to show up for each other, and she reached out to ask me a question, and then I let her in about something, and she let me in about something, and we were able to be vulnerable with each other. And it's awesome because now I know I have someone who's championing me on the other side of the world and that I can reach out to, and we just need more of that. And I think something that that goes down to like the way that the issues with our system and our cultural construct is that everything is so expensive. Like everything is monetized. So even support is monetized. So even if you want a lactation consultant, you have to pay $250 an hour in the Bay Area. And we come from a place where I'm really grateful that that's something that we're able to, that's accessible to us. But there are so many mothers who do not have access to that, or families who do not have access to that. And I think if there's anything that would be something that I would desire, it's like make healthcare accessible, make healthcare upstream, like support the mothers. It's like, don't just, it's everything is, there's just so much talk, like mothers are the greatest role that we have. Well, if that's the case, then why are we forcing mothers to go back to work after 6 weeks? So there's a lot of talk, and it's not actually reflected in the way that our society or our country or our culture is holding us. And I think this transparency, it's gonna take a long time because these are major policy changes that have to change and perspectives that have to change. But I think as raising awareness that this doesn't have to be the status quo, that we don't have to be so alone in all of this, I think it opens our hearts and minds. And I think like what we're seeing in the world right now is in America in particular, I think is going to help filter into all of these different places of our lives.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I couldn't agree more with you. My son has life-threatening food allergies, and we're fortunate enough to go to a gazillion different doctors. They're all different. I mean, they're all the same, double board certified. They all have different opinions. And it's it's probably the bravest journey I've ever been on because it's very frightening. And I try and live in a place of compassion and tranquility and peace, but it's very scary to know all day, every day, my son's life is at risk. And then I think about just Black children in general have, I believe it's like, what's the statistic? 2% of Caucasian children have food allergies, 6%, don't quote me on this, have food allergies, and of Black children have food allergies and they never recover from it, whereas Caucasian children are more likely to recover from food allergies. And there was no answer given from, who was it? I think it was FAIR, it's the Food Allergy Resource Education. But my guess is that it's the access and the cost of the care. And these children's lives are at stake every time they sit down for a meal. Thank God we can afford to send Oliver to a school that takes food allergies seriously. I can't imagine being a mom of a child who has to send my kid to a school that doesn't even have a separate table for the kid to sit at. It doesn't make a separate meal for the child. So affordability, healthcare affordability for all is so important. And thank you for bringing that up.
Yeah, that's another one of my pet peeves.
It is. It is.
Coming from Canada.
Yeah. It is so expensive.
Something that I wanted to add that has really helped me in finding myself again has been a self-compassion practice. And I actually took an 8-week course on self-compassion, which was a big step for me to like book childcare every Tuesday night for 8 weeks, whether my husband was home or not. I booked that childcare because then I would know that that's my time. And I would go to this group and learn about self-compassion. And it has completely shifted my life. It's shifted the way that I'm moving in the world, the way that I see the world. And it's allowed me to understand where my dark emotions are coming from and that they're not negative and that they're not bad. Like, it's okay to feel angry. It's okay to feel scared. It's okay to feel sad and to look at the root causes of it rather than feel shame, because so much of the past year and a half was that I would feel scared or sad or angry or resentful. And then I would feel shame for feeling those things. Like, I'm a bad person. I'm negative. I should just be grateful. So I shouldn't be going there. And having this self-compassion practice allows me to, I've always known that you should acknowledge the emotion. My practice used to be of like giving myself 24 hours to feel the emotion, and then I would get into a tub and literally have like a cleansing ritual, and then I'd say, as soon as when I step out of the tub, I'm going to actively be working to move through it. So whether it's like not looking at someone's Instagram account or not rereading that text message or whatever it was, and I had this practice since my early 20s. But the part that was missing was that I was setting boundaries with people. Like if somebody hurt me, I would say it was almost like the inner circle and then the outer ring, and then the ring gets wider and wider and wider. And so I would just move someone into a different ring. And what I realized was that I wasn't actually working through the emotion or understanding the emotion that I was feeling. I was just putting a wall up. And so I still would have anger or resentment towards the situation or the person. And so my self-compassion practice has taught me how to be able to move through it and understand it, so that I'm not just putting walls up, I'm actually breaking walls down. And I feel so much more at peace. My nervous system feels more calm. It's not a forever thing. It's always drops in a bucket. And I think that's been a huge lesson for me, is that you're going to have good days and bad days. You're going to have good days and challenging days, actually, because no day should be a bad day. You're going to have easier days and challenging days and happy days and sad days and joyful days. And you have permission to feel all of those things.
Whew, that was an inspiring conversation. Thank you all so much for listening in. I've included some extras too, because Sara and Marti and I go in and start talking a little bit more about their careers on a personal level. And I wanted to include the extra episode for you all because they say some really poignant, wise things that are true and resonate with body image postpartum. It was important for me to include the extras because I feel like this conversation could have gone on for hours. It was so powerful and so transformative. So, without further ado, check out the next episode of the extras from Navigating Motherhood with Marti and Sara. Take care.